All right, we're in Job 34. If I have it marked right, let me look. Yeah, 34, verse 21. All right, so Elihu is speaking. Of course, he has apparently been there all along. We just did not know it. And so he spent chapter 32 arguing his case that he had a right to speak. And then in 33 kind of begins his discussion with Job, or his statements to him. And now in 34, he is coming to, well, in his mind, he's coming to God's defense. Okay? And I think we talked about that some last week. Sometimes the best defense is to just get out of the way and let God defend himself. When I don't know, I wish I had the boldness of some people. I wish I had the certainty of some people. They think I'm coming to God's defense. And I'm thinking, surely he's got people better than me to come to his defense. So there's just kind of some audacity, I kind of feel like, in someone who puts himself forward that way. And obviously Elihu has a lot of audacity, which we'll see continue to unfold. So in chapter 34, he's defending in his mind God's righteous rule. Excuse me, in how he governs everything. So in verse 21 is where we'll pick up. And he is talking about God and his ability to see things clearly and to judge correctly, will be the basic thrust of what we're about to read. It says, "For his eyes are on the ways of a man, he sees all his steps. There is no gloom or deep darkness where evildoers may hide themselves." Okay, so the premise is God sees everything. And this is something that we see in tons of other texts, Hebrews 4:13, in the Psalms, and in Proverbs, and in countless other places. You can't hide from him. There's nowhere that he can't see. There's nowhere that he doesn't know what's going on. And so the fact that he has a perfect knowledge of things that transpire, which is an important, very important aspect of God. One of the things I worry about quite often are, you'll hear me qualify a lot of statements because based on what I know and the evidence I have, it's the best shot I got. But I could just as easily be shown something an hour later that could turn all that on its head. Okay? And so it's really hard for me to be as certain as even sometimes I would like to be about certain things. But when you deal with God, and the reason why I can't be as certain as I want to be about certain things is my knowledge isn't vast enough. Okay? But when you have God who knows everything, he considers every angle. There's nothing that's beyond him. So for me, I try to stay conscious of the amount of things that I do not know. Okay? And that makes what God is able to do, his judgments, when he speaks them, you can trust them with absolute certainty because he doesn't make mistakes, because he knows everything. He knows the situation, and not just what people are saying or doing, but he can read their hearts. He knows what's motivating all the things behind them. And so here he is. And so what Elihu is saying, of course, along with many of the other statements, is, yeah, he's right in what he's saying. How he applies it to Job isn't necessarily correct. Okay? So he says in verse 23, "For God has no need to consider a man further, that he should go before God in judgment. He shatters the mighty without investigation and sets others in their place. Thus, knowing their works, he overturns them in the night, and they are crushed. He strikes them for their wickedness in a place for all to see, because they turned aside from following him and had no regard for any of his ways. Okay? So the premise that he's arguing based upon God's knowledge is Job has been saying consistently that he wants his day in court, right? I want to be able to argue my case. I want somebody to stand up and argue my case. Elihu is in essence responding to that, saying, look, God doesn't need a day in court. God, because he has perfect knowledge, he just goes ahead and executes judgment. Okay? He doesn't need for there to be a trial for him to be convinced. He already knows everything and knows what's going to happen, so he can just cause it to happen immediately. But again, this goes back to one of their premises that is very naive, and that is that God punishes wickedness in real time and he rewards righteousness in real time. That is, within a small window of a person doing right, God blesses him richly. Within a small window of a person doing wrong, God curses or crushes or destroys someone. Well, look, all you have to do is open your eyes and look at the world and know that's not right. All you have to do is open your eyes and look. And there are other Psalms like Psalm 37 and Psalm 73 where that's what the psalmist is struggling with. Why is this wicked person getting away with murder? I mean, literally getting away with everything, want nothing with God. I'm trying to do my best and nothing seems to be working out. And so they're living by this absolute principle. And it affects the way that they see the world, and it affects the way that they treat people, and it ends up, as we've seen, just causing all kinds of problems. So his argument is, and he's right technically, that God doesn't need a trial to know what's going on. What is, the question sometimes is, well, what is the point of Judgment Day if God already knows everything? Well, the point of Judgment Day is about sentencing. It's about calling people's hand and holding them accountable. Okay? A lot of times we can take we can make an excuse not to hold someone accountable by saying, look, they're an adult and they're just, I can't make anybody do anything. To which I would say, you're right, you can't make anybody do anything. But you can hold people accountable. They can know that if you step across the line, you're not going to go unchecked. I'm going to come and talk to you about the line you crossed. And so it's about reminding people that there are consequences to their actions. And so what Judgment Day is God saying, okay, I let you do what you want to do, what you chose, and now there's going to be a reckoning for it. Now you're going to stand here and you're going to answer for what you've done. You're going to give an explanation and I'm going to hold you accountable. Okay? Accountability is one of the benchmarks of not just life, but really Christian life and Christian living in community. Is learning to hold people accountable to standards without going to the left too far where you don't have any standards and you don't hold anyone accountable, and without going to the right too far where you try and nitpick people. But there has to be an accountability. Okay? We have accountability in all types, in all areas of our lives, and that reflects something of the order that God has put in place. And when we don't honor that order, when we don't hold people accountable, we act in a way that's inconsistent with the character of God. Okay? Listen, I'm not under the illusion that if you and I have a conversation about behavior, I'm not under the illusion that I'm even going to change someone's mind. But we all need to know that if you cross a line, somebody's going to at least say to you, hey, you need to think about what you're doing. That's good for everybody. Okay? And so, in dealing with that, that's rooted in God's character and his judgment. And so he doesn't necessarily need it, but, you know, I hesitate to use my kids as illustrations of much of anything, but we'll keep the identity under wraps of which one. But you know, they take the bus every morning to Mars Hill, and one of them was, I don't remember the exact details of everything, but he was a little more animated than he should have been. And she told us. And so the next morning, he had to march onto the bus, look her in the face, and apologize for how he had behaved. And when he got there, he didn't want to talk, but I told him, I said, now look, if you've got the gall to be disrespectful to her, then you better have the same gall to apologize. It doesn't, listen, that is so fundamentally important. And I'm not saying that because, you know, look, I got let off the hook way too many times when I was a kid. But that's something we have to learn. And the issue comes when you have a bunch of people who've grown into adults who've never been held accountable for a thing in their life. Okay? And part of Christian faith is understanding, okay, there may be people in your life and they may just go along to get along with you and they may not hold you accountable, but I promise you this, God will. He's not afraid. And there won't be any fooling him either. So we can try our statements, but it's not going to work. So in verse 26, he says, he strikes them for their wickedness in a place for all to see. That is, not only does God punish them immediately, he punishes them publicly where all people can see it. Because they turned aside from following him and had no regard for any of his ways. They just disregarded God. So they caused the cry of the poor to come to him, and he heard the cry of the afflicted. That is, the argument that he's making here is that the specific sin in this context that he's discussing is that they mistreated the poor, or more specifically, that Job mistreated the poor, which is just ridiculous, because he did not. And so God rises up in judgment to defend the poor. And that's a very, 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 very biblical concept of how we think about, approach, and treat people who are poor. Matter of fact, I think I can argue pretty strongly that one of the greatest portions of the prophets, basically the prophets kind of fall into two sections in their condemnations. One is their idolatry, and the other is the mistreatment of the poor. It is that big of a deal to God. So, in moving on from there, he says this: when he is quiet, who can condemn? Now, the he under discussion here is God. So if God chooses to be quiet, who can condemn? When he hides his face, who can behold him? Whether it be a nation or a man. So if God chooses to delay maybe the judgment, or he chooses to punish someone without offering a full explanation, what are you going to say against him? Well, again, in principle, he's true. What he's saying is true. God doesn't owe anybody an explanation. Okay? But it just doesn't apply here. He says that a godless man should not reign, that he should not ensnare the people. And again, I think this is a statement made particularly to Job and his influence, and that he has misused his influence in some way. So he says this and he gives kind of a hypothetical situation, but really it's one of those hypotheticals where he's really talking about Job. He just doesn't say it. He says, "For has anyone said to God, I have borne punishment, I will not offend anymore. Teach me what I shall do, and if I have done iniquity, I will do it no more." Well, the answer to that is yes, some people do that. I mean, we repent. We choose not to live that way anymore. He says this in verse 33, "Will he then make repayment to suit you because you reject it? For you must choose and not I. Therefore declare what you know." And so what he's saying to Job is, look, you did wrong. God held you accountable. Are you going to do you think he's going to give everything back to you? All the stuff you've lost, you think he owes that stuff back to you? But again, time out. Job has never asked for a single thing back. The only thing he has ever asked for is God. That's it. And that's what he has mourned the most in the process. So he says this in 34, "Men of understanding will say to me, and the wise man who hears me will say, Job speaks without knowledge. His words are without insight. Would that Job were tried to the end, because he answers like wicked men, for he adds rebellion to his sin. He claps his hands among us," the idea of taunting, "and multiplies his words against God." And so, in essence, you see how the two thinking of the two friend groups kind of comes together. The friends are making the argument Job has done something terribly wrong and he has sinned, and that's why this is happening to him. Elihu doesn't necessarily argue that as much as he argues the way he's handling what has happened to him is sinful. Okay? So one is arguing on this side of destruction, you must have done something wrong. One is saying, okay, I'm not going to address that. I want to address how you're behaving right now. And how you're behaving right now is sinful. Okay? And so he's saying other people, men of understanding, would agree with me. Okay, by the way, I'm suspicious when somebody says, everybody is saying. Because, as human beings, we kind of have this tendency to, if we don't feel like our case is very strong, we try and bolster it. And so, in essence, we pile on people to our case. Now, the reason why we say, well, everybody agrees with it is because on many occasions, not all, but on many occasions, the reason why we're saying everybody is because it's virtually unprovable. Right? Why is it that a teenager says, why do we say that to our parents? Well, everybody else is doing it. It's virtually unprovable. Nobody has the time to go and look and talk to every single person to see if they're doing it. Okay. So sometimes when people want to add on to their case to make it sound stronger, they want to say, everybody agrees with me. When in reality, they're actually doing more speaking for everybody than they are actually talking to everybody. So when someone comes and they start in this big, broad way, I'm going to be honest with you, my skeptical antenna starts moving. Listen, even if everybody did agree with that, the merits of the case alone ought to be enough to make the argument. Why do I need 3 million other people behind it if it's a case? Look, if it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If you have a case, you have a case. If you don't, you don't. I don't need to know what everybody else thinks about it. And so he pours that on to try and bolster himself up. Thus, Job is just being difficult to get along with, and that's why all of this continues to go poorly for him. Okay? All right, that's 34. Any questions or anything on 34? All right, let's move quickly then in 35. It's a little bit shorter. So Elihu answers and says, do you think this to be just? Do you say, it is my right before God that you ask, what advantage have I? How am I better off than if I had sinned? Okay, so he's once again, like he did a couple times in the previous chapter, he's somewhat quoting Job. You remember we talked about that last week. There is a difference between rightly conveying what someone has said, and that's not always just using the same words they used. Okay? Because we, sometimes we can, come on. Surely you can see these disagreements. Well, you said, and when you hear that person say it, there's just a whole bunch of sarcasm that's just dripping off of this word. And you're sitting there watching it going, no, wait a minute. If you're talking about word for word, that's what they said? Yeah, that's right. But you see that 5 pounds of sarcasm that just came off that word? They didn't do that. They didn't do that. And so, even though someone can technically say, and I've heard and made the same argument myself before, I'm using your words. Yes, but using your words also means faithfully representing your words. Not putting more mustard on it because I want to try and knock you down a peg. Do you think this to be just? Job, do you think that you're doing the right thing here? Do you say it is my right before God, that you have a right to be answered? Again, is that what Job has said? I haven't seen him, in what I've seen, I've not seen anything where Job says, God, you have to answer me. I've seen him be pretty heartbroken that he wants God to answer him, but I've not seen him look at God and go, you have to answer me. Then you ask, what advantage have I? How am I better off than if I had sinned? Again, misconstruing the words that Job has said. And some of the words that Job has said have been words in a degree of sarcasm to answer some of the accusations of friends, which have been completely inappropriate in the arguments that they were making. So, again, that's another wrinkle with the quotations. So he says this, I will answer you and your friends with you. Whew. He's getting stronger as he goes, isn't he? All right, I'm going to answer you and your friends, which, I don't know how else to take that other than the 3 friends who've been talking in the book. So he says, okay, I'm going to correct all you. Again, maybe I just wish I had that kind of gall. But to think you're the guy that's going to walk in and set everybody right? Whew. Boy, I hope you're 9 times sharper than you even think you are. Or as my granddad used to say all the time, I'd like to buy them for what they're worth and sell them for what they think they're worth, right? Make a pretty hefty profit on that. So here he is. Let me set you straight. Let me give you this profound wisdom. Look at the heavens and see, and behold the clouds which are higher than you. Look up toward where God is. Look at the distance between you and God. If you have sinned, what do you accomplish against him? And if your transgressions are multiplied, what do you do to him? Okay? That is, when you do wrong, you're not really affecting God. And in a way, that's right. In another way, it's completely wrong. And it's not easy to tell exactly how he means it here. He says, if you are righteous, what do you give him? Or what does he receive from your hand? That is, if you're a righteous man. So if you do something wrong, you're not making I mean, you're not really affecting God, but if you do something good, you're also not making God any better. The point I think he's trying to make is that you don't add or diminish value to and from God. Like, you don't have that, you don't have that level of importance. Okay? He says, your wickedness concerns a man like yourself, and your righteousness a son of man. Okay? So, these may be things that would impress other people, but they're not necessarily things that would impress God or move him in certain ways. Verse 9, because of the multitude of oppressions, people cry out. They call for help because of the arm of the mighty, but none says, where is God my maker, who gives songs in the night, who teaches us more than the beasts of the earth, and who makes us wiser than the birds of heaven? Okay? So people cry out to God, or people cry out because they are mistreated. In this illustration, obviously Job would be the person crying out. But none says, where is God my maker? That is, they don't seek God to try and understand what is happening to them, the one who teaches us all things, which again is foolish because Job has been doing that. 12, there they cry out, but he does not answer because of the pride of evil men. And so the implication to Job is the reason he's not answering you is because you're arrogant. You think you're demanding that he answer you, and God doesn't owe you anything. Now again, is that true? That God doesn't owe us anything? Yeah, that's true. He doesn't owe us a thing. But it doesn't apply. And again, you may be getting tired of hearing that, but that's not exactly outside of the plan I have in saying that over and over again. Because when we hear things over and over again, when someone can make fun of you for a phrase you use and they think they're making fun of you, you know where the real joke lies, don't you? My words are so stuck in your head you can't get them out. So have your joke, but all you did was prove it worked. But one of the reasons why I think that's important is in a lot of conversations, I hear people talking at each other. And when they talk at each other, they're arguing points biblically that are biblically accurate. They just simply do not apply to the situation under discussion. They don't apply to the person they're talking to. Okay? And so it's not enough just to know what God has said, what he expects, what his standards are. You have to then be able to know when a situation fits and then use that information to help the situation. Okay? Let me illustrate this way. So a lot of times there is, well, let's just go to the discussion about is baptism important? Well, some people will say, well, of course, let me rephrase that. Everybody says it's important. That's not right. That's not a correct statement I made. Everyone says it's important. Is it essential? And so I have watched this many times in my life. A person, they just open their Bible and they start reading all the verses. Baptism for the remission of sins, wash away sins, cut away sins, saves, on and on and on and on and on. And the other person's over here, faith, it saves. A person's sins are forgiven. They believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you'll be saved. And they're just reading verses back and forth to each other. What's being accomplished? Nothing. Nothing. Because what we're playing is a game called Your Verse, My Verse. These are the verses that agree with what I'm saying. These are the verses that agree with what I'm saying. And look, when you stand on the outside, you kind of have to look at them and go, wait a minute. Yep, both in the same book. God said them both. So the question is not, well, wait a minute, you're saying something God didn't say. Yes, you are. Or you're saying something God didn't say. Yes, you are. Your disagreement is on understanding how those two things work together. That's your disagreement. You can't even identify the issue at hand. That's the question. So let's back up to 12. They cry out, but he does not answer because of the pride of evil men. That's why he's not listening to. Surely God does not hear an empty cry, nor does the Almighty regard it. Maybe a shot at Job saying that he just really wants his pain eased, not that he really wants to. He's not really sincere in the answer he wants from God. How much less when you say that you do not see him, that the case is before him, and you are waiting for him. Okay? You keep saying, Job has been saying, look, like, I want to make my case. I want somebody to make my case something. But you're not in essence, what Elihu is saying is the reason why God won't answer your case is because you haven't acknowledged God the way that you should, which again is foolish. Verse 15, and now because his anger does not punish, he does not take much note of transgression, Job opens his mouth in empty talk. He multiplies words without knowledge. So you just keep running your mouth and you keep piling it up, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. Once again, it is a right principle. Proverbs does say, in the multitude of words there ceases not to be sin. The more we talk, the more opportunities we have to mess up. Okay? And as someone in a talking profession, I can tell you, it happens a lot. I mean, a whole lot. And sometimes the best thing to learn how to do, again, I don't think this applies to Job, because Job has been quiet. Elihu has gone round after round, and he hasn't interrupted him. He's just let him talk. Sometimes the best thing we can do is, at a certain point, just stop. Just stop. Like, just stop digging, okay? Just stop the digging. Cut off the bleeding, whatever you want to call it. Like, one of the, I don't remember where I saw it in high school, several friends of mine, and we were compiling something for something, and one of the quotes that we took and we ran with was, never miss a good opportunity to shut up. Just never miss a good opportunity to stop. So with that, I think it's only smart that I stop. So we'll pick up in 36. We'll try and finish off Elihu next week, and then we'll move into God's speech, which will be pretty powerful and overwhelming.